Welcome to episode 326 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Meyers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing writer-director Scott Teems, who just wrote and directed a film called The Quarry, starring Shea Wigham and Michael Shannon. We talk about this film as well as how he broke into the industry. He's done a lot of TV writing as well, so we talk a little bit about that. And we also talk about how he got staffed on Rectify and Narcos Mexico. So stay tuned for that interview. The SYS six-figure screenplay contest is now open for submissions. Just go to www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/contest. The early bird discount runs through May 31st. The idea for this contest was simple: find the best low-budget scripts and present them to the industry. I'm defining low budget as less than $1 million US, in other words, six figures or less. If you have any questions about how to figure out the budget of your screenplay, I created a short video which you can find on the contest landing page. Here's how it's all going to work. Every submission will get read by at least 3 professional readers. These are readers I have hired to read scripts in the first round. Each reader will give each script a quick assessment, which you can actually purchase if you'd like to see these and get some quick feedback on your script. Then the scripts that stand out from the first round will move into the second round, where we will disseminate the scripts out to the industry judges. And then the industry judges will grade the scripts again. I'll have a look at everything and we will decide on our winners. We're giving away thousands in cash and prizes to the winners. I've lined up about 40 industry pros as judges. They're listed on the contest landing page with links to their IMDb pages. Many of the judges are people who you may be familiar with, as they're people that I've had on the podcast. These are real filmmakers who are out there making movies. And one of the big reasons that these folks are willing to be judges in this contest is because they're hoping to find material that they themselves can produce. And some of the judges include are guys like Daniel Zarelli from episode number 125, Mark Stolaroff from episode 256, Jeffrey Giles from episode 246. These are all, again, working producers, directors, working in the low budget space, and those are just an example of some of the producers that are going to be our industry judges. So again, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/contest if you want to check out who the other judges are, and perhaps enter the contest or learn more about it. There's some ins and outs. Some of the more details are on the contest page as well. Again, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/contest. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking or sharing it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mentioned in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcasts, and then just look for episode number 326. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I'll teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and query letter, and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I am interviewing writer-director Scott Teems. Here is the interview. Welcome, Scott, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So to start out, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
Yeah, I come from Georgia. I grew up just outside of Atlanta in the suburbs, and I was just, always one of those kids, kind of a classic story. Always one of those kids who had a video camera in his hand and would convince my teachers to let me make little movies and little book reports. And I had a couple of teachers along the way who really encouraged me, and especially this teacher I had in the 8th grade named Miss Harrison, and just let me make a bunch of movies during her class, and that kind of lit the fire. And from there, I just kind of went with it. I did it all through high school, off and on, while playing sports and doing other things. And and went to school, got a film degree, and then moved to New York right after college. And just started trying to do it. Wrote a lot of bad scripts, but each one seemed to be a little less bad than the one before, and made a bunch of short films. And that was kind of I studied film history and film theory in school, and that was, I think, really important for my foundation. You know, I think it's really important to have that knowledge of history, so we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. And after that, it was then just a process of trial by error and just writing and writing and writing and writing.
Yeah. So you've done some TV writing. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that transition. You did these short films. How did you transition from, making short films, being a film student, to actually being paid professionally to write? What was that like, and what exactly did you do to get onto, like, let's say, Rectify? What was that process?
Yeah, well, before Rectify, I wrote and directed a feature, and that was really the way I broke in. I made this movie about 10 years ago called That Evening Sun, and it premiered at South by Southwest and won some awards, and that got me, representation and agent, manager, and all that. But the way that film came together was I optioned this short story myself. I was looking for a great story. I'd written some scripts, but I've never been a big idea guy. Like I like the process of figuring out what a movie is from a story. That's why I've always been drawn to adaptation. And I was looking for a great story to write. I found this short story by this author named William Gay, optioned that story myself and developed the script, and was finally able to put that movie together. It was a little $1 million independent film. And that movie is what kind of broke me through. And on that film, I worked with Ray McKinnon. As an actor, he also produced the movie, but he's in the movie as well. And Ray then eventually, and Ray was a huge part, like Ray's interest in the movie, both as a producer and an actor. Ray and Walton Goggins, they had a film company together at that point, and they were both Georgia guys, and both guys I looked up to, and I sought them out to be in this movie and to produce the movie to help kind of shepherd me through this process. And so their interest is what really helped bring the money and get the movie rolling. And then 5 years later, or 4 years later, when Rectify happened, which Ray created. So Ray was the showrunner, and he created that show.
I see.
And in the second season, he called me up and said, "Hey, do you want to come work on that show?" And little did he know that I had been trying to break into TV, but I couldn't because I didn't have any experience, didn't have any TV specs or whatever. So he helped me with my film career, and he helped me with my TV career. So
How did you meet Ray? What was that process like, getting on his radar and actually getting him to notice you?
This is a beautiful sort of LA story. My friend Terrence Barry, who was producing that movie with me, not my first movie, we were looking for. We had Ray and Walt on our radar and trying to find them, but we had no way to get a hold of them. We didn't have agents. We couldn't. No one took our calls, but living in LA, sometimes you have a bit of luck. And literally, Terrence was in Paquito Mas, this Mexican restaurant in Burbank, and heard this voice behind him that sounded like Ray McKinnon. Turned around, and there he was, sitting there, and in the most classic way you can imagine, Terrence walked over to Ray and said, "Hey, man, you don't know me, but I've got a script." And it's the most hokey story ever, but it worked. And Ray said, "Sure, send it to me." And in a couple of months, he read the script, got back to us, and said, "Hey, man, let's talk." And I think because we were all from the South, and he felt a familiar voice and a familiar spirit, that helped a lot, And but then, that was one of those fortunate, stories where you just run into somebody on the street, which happens sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially living in LA. That's one of the big advantages, just being in LA, being in that fishbowl. So let's dig into your latest film, The Quarry, starring Michael Shannon. Maybe to start out, you can give us a quick pitch or log line. What is this film all about?
Yeah, The Quarry is about this mysterious drifter who rolls into this small Texas town claiming to be the new preacher, but he's got some secrets he's holding, and he gets in this cat and mouse game with the local police chief. And while guilt and conscience begin to weigh upon him. It's a suspense thriller, kind of a character piece, sort of a Texas noir.
Mm-hmm. And where did this idea come from? What was the genesis of this project?
It was also a book. It's based on a novel by a South African writer named Damon Galgut, which I read about 10 years ago. But I was struck, so even though it was a post-apartheid story about racial injustice in that country, I was struck by the similarities to what we're experiencing in our country in sort of racial conflict and strife, plus the sort of barren plains, South African coastal landscape reminded me of Texas, and it felt like a very natural translation, especially when you have a sort of classic premise like the stranger rolls into town kind of story, which we've seen before. Mm-hmm. But that's a universal premise. Be translated to any setting or milieu, and that was what grabbed me. And so I came to the book.
Okay, perfect. So let's talk about your actual writing process. And maybe to start, we can just kind of talk about the collaboration with Andrew Brotzman. What does that process look like? Do you guys sit in the same room? Do you guys use Skype? How does your reading, do you do an outline together and then divide up scenes, then come together? Maybe you can just sort of talk us through your process with Andrew on the writing of this script.
Yeah, Andrew and I have written a couple of things together, and he was an old friend of mine who just always gave me the best notes. And I'd actually written several drafts of the Quarry before I brought Andrew on, but I got to a point where I realized the script I couldn't crack whatever the next sort of level it needed to be. It needed to be deeper, richer, fuller. And Andrew had given me a lot of great notes on it already, and so I asked him to come on and work with me. And how we've developed over the years a partnership writing, we don't write together. We'll take a draft each and sort of pass drafts back and forth. I'll do a draft. We'll get together. We'll meet. We'll talk through all his notes and his ideas. We'll get to another place. He'll take it and do a pass, and we just pass it back and forth over time. We're both pretty quick writers, and that is a fairly expeditious process. But we just really like to challenge each other, but then we also like to just go write. We have a pretty similar spirit and tone in how we write. And even though we come, Andrew's from Maine, he comes from a very different place than I do, but he can capture the same sort of spirit I'm going for often, and we have a lot of mutual interest in. And so we write and get together and talk and then go back and write, and that's how we usually work.
I got you. So then on this one, so you got the book and then you sort of broke that down into an outline and then ultimately created this first draft, which then you started working with Andrew on. How long does that process take for you between, reading the book, breaking it down, and then actually producing that first draft?
Yeah, I always I've done several adaptations, and I usually tend to start writing too soon. I'm a pretty impatient guy, and I wish I could say I sit there and work the whole outline out and figure it all out, but I tend to have to learn through the writing of the script. I just feel like I discover what the story is by writing the script. Now, that is not a very efficient process because it means I usually write many more drafts than I would normally, but I just always had a difficult time sort of projecting the end or sort of figuring it out in the macro. I tend to work better in the micro. And just, it ends up being, that's why I like to work with writing partners, because, we can sort of, because of that efficient process that Andrew and I have, for example, we can move through it rather quickly and identify problems sooner, perhaps, than I could on my own. And I've worked with a few different writers over the years, and whether it's just balancing the writing together, I tend to just figure it out on the page, as opposed to sort of sitting back and working in the micro. And then mornings, I take a long walk, usually about a 5-mile walk every morning, and that's when I work out most of my story problems, and then come back and put them down on the page.
I got you. So with this one, you mentioned this is kind of a tried and true genre or subgenre, the stranger rolling into town. As you were saying that, I was trying to think of some of the films that kind of fall into that. I think there's sort of the Western, sort of tropes. What are some of the tropes that you kind of tried to play with? Are there some specific things that you tried to subvert, some tropes you tried to subvert? And what are some of these other films that you looked at to kind of, build that sort of knowledge of, what came before you?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to that genre, that specific story, like you said, definitely you have the sort of Clint Eastwood, Man Without a Name sort of westerns that first come to mind. You also have a film like Night of the Hunter, which is a big, sort of touchstone as well. And then when you get to the world of sort of Texas noir and character pieces, anything that's in Texas crime genre in the last 10 years sort of sits in the shadow of No Country for Old Men, and I'm happy to sit in that shadow. It's one of the greatest films in the last 20 years, and so I really look to that as well as a movie like, which also has elements of both those ideas, but in terms of playing with the genre or subverting it, one thing I liked about the book was that in most of those stories, it begins with the stranger rolls into town, and then you have to figure out who is he and what has he done in his past. Whereas what appealed to me about the Quarry in the novel was that you see what he's done right from the beginning, and the sin he's running from happens, in the story as you're reading and experiencing it. So there's no question of what has he done or who he is. You know who he is. And so that changes the emphasis of what the story is about. It's no longer a mystery about who is this guy. It's more of a mystery or suspense sort of film about what's he going to do now. And I liked that was a sort of different take that I hadn't seen before, and that changed the focus and made it more about guilt and conscience and sort of the weight of all that on a person and what it means to carry that burden. And that interested me greatly.
Yeah. So, and I totally get that. So that's sort of the angle you're coming at with this material. Were there some big parts of the book that maybe you had to cut for whatever reason? They weren't cinematic or they just didn't quite work on the script. I'm always curious just to kind of hear of that process going from the book to the movie. What did you cut? Did you have to add some things? Were some things that were not in the book that you had to add just to make it more cinematic?
Well, definitely the book's very cinematic. It's very visual. It's written in this sort of very sparse, tense sort of language that creates a lot of open imagery, and he's a great writer that way, Galgut. And then just the translation from South Africa to the United States, of course, brought with it its own sort of set of new ideas and specificity that made it different. But in general, the big beats of the novel are pretty much kept intact until the end, and the book the ultimate themes of the book are sort of about the cycle of violence and about the unstoppable cyclical force of it, and there are elements of that in the movie for sure, but how that comes to bear at the end of the end of the book kind of brings in some coincidence and circumstance into the end of the book that works as a literary device, but was less. For example, there's this circus that comes into town, and there's this tiger that ends up busting into the courthouse and doing all these things, which works really well. As wild as it sounds, it works on the page, but that was never going to work in the movie because the entire climax was triggered by this sort of crazed animal that had nothing to do with the rest of the story. But so I had to change that and simplify that. Wasn't going to get a tiger down to our shoot and let him run through the set. So that was never going to happen. But I just simplified that and made it more about the characters and focus. And that was really the work that was done, was clearing out a lot of the external stuff. Even in the editing process, like a lot of the subplots went away as we just focused on to the man on the run, and just made it, cleared a path for his guilt to the main driving force of the film and the story.
Yeah, that's no, that's great. So I'm curious. You've worked a lot in features. You've worked a lot in TV. Maybe you can talk about some of the things you like about TV writing, some of the things you don't like, compared to feature writing. And same thing. What are the things you like about feature writing versus TV writing, and what are the things you like better about TV writing?
Yeah, one thing I feel very fortunate that I've been able to do some different things, and because it scratches different itches, and for example, writing my independent films that I try to direct, like That Evening Sun and The Quarry, I'm able to explore some, more character-based work, whereas like writing films like Halloween Kills, which I just wrote, it plays with, allows me to use different muscles, and I like genre and just writing for other directors, especially someone like David Gordon Green, who is going to take what you do and just make it excellent. It really you to just dream big and let constraints of your mind and sort of just dream up the wildest ideas. That's a lot of fun, and so I enjoy. TV writing's good, even though I'm an introvert, like many writers, and being in a writer's room can be challenging at times because it just wears me out. Because I don't, being in a room with people all day is being alone. But I do find a great creation inside that writer's room. Much like the process with a writing partner on a feature, having more voices you can churn through story ideas so much more quickly, and that's really powerful when you're trying to figure out an entire 10 or 12 episode season, and that becomes fun. I really enjoy the process of revisiting characters and getting deeper. And the deeper you get into a TV show, the more your scenes can be just about characters. And you can have simpler scenes that are just people talking about, this little thing. And not every single scene has to drive the story forward in TV the way it does in a movie, and you have more time and more flexibility. And I also like that quite a bit.
Yeah, for sure. So how can people see The Quarry? What's the release schedule going to be like, and how can people find it?
April 17th. It comes out on VOD, and it's a crazy time with all the stay at home and the quarantine. But I hope that what's cool about it is we decided just to press ahead with our release, and knowing people are going to want something to watch. And so I'm excited for people to get to see it, and it'll be available on VOD on all the major platforms on April 17th.
Okay, perfect. And what's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing? Twitter, Facebook, a blog, anything you're comfortable sharing, I will round up for the show notes. Yeah,
no, I appreciate it. I am proudly anti-social media, so
gotcha.
Of my career probably, but I just have not proudly. That's overstating. I'm just not, it's not something that I do, and it's more about I have OCD, so I would waste all my time all day long.
No, I'm kind of with you on that. So
spreading over my accounts, so I just decided to not do that. But I'm sure there's going to be some Instagram and Twitter accounts for the film, hopefully, and you can check out Lionsgate. That Lionsgate's putting the movie out, so I'm sure they'll have updates and stuff on their socials as well.
Okay, perfect. Well, Scott, I appreciate you coming on and talking with me today. Good luck with this film, and good luck with your future films as well.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I just want to talk quickly about SYS Select. It's a service for screenwriters to help them sell their screenplays and get writing assignments. The first part of the service is the SYS Select Screenplay Database. Screenwriters upload their screenplays along with a logline, synopsis, and other pertinent information like budget and genre, and then producers search for and hopefully find screenplays they want to produce. Dozens of producers are in the system looking for screenplays right now. There have been a number of success stories come out of the service. You can find out about all the SYS Select successes by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/success. Also on SYS podcast episode 222, I talked with Steve Deering, who was the first official success story to come out of the SYS Select database. When you join SYS Select, you get access to the screenplay database along with all the other services that we're providing to SYS Select members. These services include the newsletter. This monthly newsletter goes out to a list of over 400 producers who are actively seeking writers and screenplays. Each SYS Select member can pitch one screenplay in this monthly newsletter. We also provide screenwriting leads. We have partnered with one of the premier paid screenwriting leads services, so I can syndicate their leads to SYS Select members. There are lots of great paid leads coming in each week from our partner. Recently, we've been getting 5 to 10 high-quality paid leads per week. These leads run the gamut. There's producers looking for a specific type of spec script to producers looking to hire a screenwriter to write up one of their ideas or properties. They're looking for shorts, features, TV, and web series pilots, all types of projects. If you sign up for SYS Select, you'll get these leads emailed directly to you several times per week. Also, you get access to the SYS Select forum, where we will help you with your logline and query letter and answer any screenwriting related questions that you might have. We also have a number of screenwriting classes that are recorded and available in the SYS Select forum. These are all the classes that I've done over the years, so you'll have access to those whenever you want once you join. The classes cover every part of writing your screenplay, from concept to outlining to the first act, second act, third act, as well as other topics like writing short films and pitching your projects in person. Once again, if this sounds like something you'd like to learn more about, please go to sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. Again, that is sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing actor, producer, director, and writer David Wall. He just did a new film called Gold Dust. We talk about that film, how he got that going. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview with Scott. I thought it was really interesting, his story about how he met the other producer from Georgia. This is a real good example of how networking actually works so often. And I find myself in this situation, especially when I first got to Hollywood. You get here and you know that networking and relationships are a big part of this industry. And I remember, again, especially when I first got to Hollywood, I'd really make an effort to go to some of these shindigs, and I never really got anything out of it. I never met that, producer. I'm from Maryland, so I never met that producer from Maryland. But I think this is a real good example. And over the years, I have made connections and I have networked and I have made, formed friendships and relationships with industry people. And, you never know what you're going to connect on. And I think that's really the key. The key is not, he got lucky because he met this guy from Georgia. But the fact of the matter is he was putting himself out there. And if you're just always putting yourself out there, you are just, sincere and genuine with your interests, you're friendly to people, eventually you're going to meet people that you do connect with. Maybe you're not from Georgia. Maybe you're from, again, like me, from Maryland. And eventually I would meet those other filmmakers from Maryland. And in fact, I have actually. Gavin Peretti is actually one of the producers on The Rideshare Killer, and he's coincidentally from Maryland. And I definitely think we did connect on that level. Again, this is just an example. He was one of the producers on, he was the AD on The Pinch, is how I met him. And again, we just connected. And then, I brought him along on as a producer onto The Rideshare Killer. And again, this is like, it's actual networking. And I don't feel like you have to go into these things, because this was always my thing. Again, being so pragmatic and, really trying to maximize value. I would go into these things, whether it was going to a networking event where maybe someone was speaking, or maybe it was just a cocktail hour. I would go to these things, think, okay, I got to talk to people and, pass my card out. And I think what I was missing was, I just need to go there and just be honest and sincere and genuine and just talk to people and let these things happen organically. Because I can look at all the relationships that I've built over the 20 years that I've been in Hollywood, and there is a sincerity and honesty to those relationships where we, generally speaking, most of these people we've bonded with in some way, just on a sort of a friendly level, more than just something, just some sort of awkward forced situation where you go somewhere and you're trying to force the situation and force the relationship. Never worked for me. And again, you just never know what you're going to connect on. And so the key is to put yourself out there a lot. It's not to try and find other people, although maybe that wouldn't be a bad strategy. Find other people. Maybe there's some networking events for your particular college. That would be a great place, because again, you'd start off with, if you were meeting in LA, other people that went to your college, you would start off with a common interest. Just again, and it would be a very organic one. You could share those stories. Oh, remember when? Oh yeah, this dorm or that dorm or the cafeteria. You would have something in common. But I think as just like a model, as like a template, I always felt like I was going into these things, and I always felt like I tried to sort of force them. And I never, as I said, I never made any connections really. at these sort of networking events that I would go to. And again, I think it was because maybe I was trying to force it too much, and perhaps maybe not outgoing enough, and other things like that. But that's the thing that that struck me as this, is that a lot of times there are these moments that do seem a little bit lucky. Oh, he met this other producer from Georgia. He was from Georgia. They connected. But, there was probably a lot of people that Scott met over the years that he didn't connect with. Producers from other places, from California or Seattle or whatever. And he probably didn't connect with those. He didn't have that common interest or that common, values, or just, background or whatever it was. And that made the connection. He didn't have that with other people. So those relationships didn't work out. And, we're only hearing about and looking at the one relationship that did work out. And so it appears to us, oh, wow, it's just, it was so lucky. The other thing, and hopefully some of this comes through with the interview, Scott is not someone I know. I've never met him. The only interaction I've had, maybe there's a minute or two before the recording actually starts, but pretty much all of my interaction with him was through this podcast. And the feeling I got, and hopefully you guys got the same feeling as well, is that he's kind of an outgoing, very friendly guy. Seemed very personable, intelligent, articulate. And again, those are all things that, obviously help all of us. I mean, those are just communication skills and being able to relate to people. Those are all skills that, we need in every facet of our lives. And I think my problem with these network events, I just always felt like I was maybe trying to force it, as opposed to just trying to be sincere and genuine. Anyways, hopefully you got something out of the interview with Scott. That's our show for this week. Thank you for listening.